Welcome! You're listening to Making Relationships Work. We're a company focused on women and their marriage. We lead and teach women just like you how to grow into and access, whenever you need to, your wise woman's self. The part of you who is deeply connected to your purpose, your innate wisdom, and your husband and family. We teach women in marriages how to rebuild trust and connection, to work through conflicts no matter how deep, no matter how painful, and to lead your marriage to a place where the two of you experience marriage mastery. This podcast is about learning the systems and techniques that truly work to reconnect you back into your marriage so that you can experience the freedom that comes with a masterful marriage. Since this podcast is totally free, if you're getting tons of value and you want to support us and make sure that you get more of this good stuff, subscribe below and rate and review our podcast today. Now, on to the show. Hello, friends. It's me. It's Meg, back talking to you live and going to talk to you about something pretty important tonight. So I want to talk to you about the role of fatigue in the decimation, big word, chosen carefully, of life and marriage. So you might know that I recently turned 40. You might know that I have 2 kids, that only one is in school, the other one is preschool. And you might also know that I run Making Relationships Work. This space that you're in right now is the free Facebook group or podcast or YouTube channel. You might know that about me. But what you don't know about me is that very recently I was diagnosed with a iron deficiency, not just like a low levels, but an anemia. And I learned a couple of things about life when I got that diagnosis. I learned that women, and I'm going to generalize, but I learned that women are really susceptible to low iron levels, and we're really susceptible to anemia. And I learned that that is from a couple of different things. So this isn't a medical channel. It's not my place to go and medical speak to you, but I will talk generally about anemia and fatigue, and maybe fatigue more in general. But even though I don't have like a very young family anymore, and when I did have a young family, I felt this level of tiredness all the time, I wanted to talk about the role of fatigue and how it affects every part of your life. And if you are in the trenches of a young family, or you are in the busy older age kids who have those complex kind of emotional problems, plus they need pick up and drop off. And FYI, who on earth sanctioned that a 9-year-old should be playing basketball at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday night? Like, I don't get that. But also, that is the life, the modern life that we live. And we get so tired. And that tiredness, we're conditioned to keep running in. When we're exhausted, it has this very long ripple effect. And that's what I want to talk with you about tonight, because this ripple effect of fatigue means that we cut corners. We cut corners, maybe not in our workspace, but maybe in our workspace. We cut corners in our parenting space. We cut corners in our marriage space, and we cut corners in ourself. And you and I both know that it's the self that goes first. The trouble is that short term, we can cut corners, but fatigue at the level that I'm talking about, where you've been at the grind for many years, where you've had not a lot of good sleep, where you've had an overextension of what's required of you just to deliver a kind of normal week, that level of fatigue, it might not deplete your iron levels to the point of mine, but it will still impact you. Your body biochemically might be fine. Maybe it's good for a checkup though to go get your bloods if you're exhausted. That's a good idea. But the fatigue anyway, the fatigue of there's not enough sleep, there's not enough time, I don't know how to fit that in. I I am always behind, never in front. I go to bed with a list of things to do and I wake up in the morning and no matter how hard I run at that list, it doesn't get done. This is the life of a modern woman. It's the life of a modern family. So I don't need to be so gender specific, but I'm talking to women here normally. So this is our life. And the trouble with our life is that it's normalized that we should feel so tired. Do you know that this generation, our generation, is the first generation to not have a hobby? And that might seem inconsequential, but in a minute it will become apparent about how important it is that we do have a hobby. But this generation doesn't have a hobby. If anything, it has a side hustle. And that speaks very much to our culture, where housing has never been more unaffordable. The cost of living has never been higher. The wage gap hasn't caught up. All of that, plus the modern information exchange through platforms, social media, but also being able to be working online over the weekend, checking your emails, means that we have this relentless amount of stress, which depletes our body. Now, a little bit of stress is useful, but as soon as you tip into unhealthy stress, it becomes a tax or a burden on your system. And so what women, and I'm speaking to women, but if you're a man that's listening on a YouTube channel, then hear yourself being spoken to equally. But what women used to do is they used to do needlework, or they used to do macrame, or they used to make, remember those dolls in the 80s that were painted? They used to do hobbies. They used to do that bark painting where they'd peel off the bark off the trees and then glue it down and make a scene on an A4 piece of paper. And these, or they used to garden or do an art class or ceramics, you know? Those hobbies are what allowed their body to recover from the load they were carrying. And if you think about, you know, what life was like for your grandmother or for your mother, they had far less machinery to do their jobs. So they have worked a lot more physically, but they also were probably not working as well as trying to run a family, as well as trying to have a side hustle. Our generation, hey? And so they had more space to recalibrate, to refuel, and they still had a harder life because life was hard in different ways back then. But for what I want to talk about, this idea of fatigue and no time and no space for me in my life, the lack of hobbies is a real problem. The biochemistry that's impacted by the load that we carry is a problem. And I think where we need to take this next conversation is, yes, women take the first hit. We're more likely to carve away our own space. So we don't do a hobby, we do a side hustle. Or we might just read a book once a week, maybe. Or we might take a bath and call it good. And those things are good, like, don't get me wrong. But what we're missing is this broader sense of belonging to something along the way, where we get refueled and we get to own our own identity. And the problem with this busy life that we have, apart from the things we've already talked about, is that we take first from ourselves, but the very next part or person that feels our pain is our husband. And our husband probably has an equivalent experience, but they also desperately want us to be okay. And so we start to complain. We start to say, it's too hard. I don't have enough. You don't do this. I'm missing this. I wish you would do this. Why hasn't this happened? I can't do this. And our husband goes into fix-it mode. And then we feel unheard and we feel like nothing will ever change. And we start to make problems in our marriage where if we had more energy, there would be less. And so this whole tax on families and women in particular is having a ripple effect because it goes to the husband and we feel this disconnect between husband and wife, which then the children feel. And so we've got this transfer of stress everywhere. And that feels like, well, how do I get out of that? And the problem is, if you don't get out of that, is that the load on your children, the load on your marriage, the load on yourself isn't sustainable. And you've heard me talk many times about how it takes kind of 6 months. Wait, wrong word. It takes 6 years for a marriage to go into crisis. And it's usually 6 years of this level of heavy lifting that starts to take a toll. And we start to see ourselves not act in a way that feels congruent with our actual heart. We become bitchy or mean or critical or contemptuous, or we just check out and become avoidant. And then so do our husbands. And so it might not be us that started. I'm not pointing fingers here, but I am saying that this load, it doesn't allow for us to show up as our best self because we're on the back foot. We're behind. We're always behind. And if you're feeling behind, then you're not feeling powerful. And if you're not feeling powerful, then you become mean. Yes? And so women carry this load, and we are powerful in so many ways, but we're also exhausted. And when we're exhausted, we become mean. And when we're mean, it trickles. It trickles to our kids, it trickles to our husbands, and we don't like it to trickle out to our friends. So we try and keep the veneer, keep the shield up. But of course, if it's going on for long enough, it starts to go into our colleague space, our friend space, our family of origin space. And so you and I, what we're talking about is the impact that our modern life has on us and our lack of outlets, our lack of belonging, our lack of space to just be a human, that you lose in these adult years where you are kind of raising young families, and the impact that has on your marriage. And so what do we do in that space? What we're looking for is, well, check your biochemistry, check your iron levels. But apart from that, we're looking at how do you make space for you? Because a woman who has a bit of space for herself, an hour a day, sounds luxurious, doesn't it? An hour a day to read, to walk, to run, to write, to have coffee, to swim, to watch a TV show, to read a book. A woman who has that amount of space with no pressure, who's making something for the gentle pleasure of art or creation, who gets lost in that world, her whole biochemistry resets. Her ability to love is much easier because she's full. She's full of the things that feel good. And then she can look at her marriage, and she can look at her parenting, and she can add in anything she needs to. And so you might find that there's some damage done with not being able to make space for you. And in that moment, you might want to look at my masterclass, which has some repairing strategies and some new skills that always allow you to feel better. So I'll put the masterclass in there. But you also might find that it's in that nourishing of the self, as you come up and out, you can start to see the reality of the burden that is placed on our families and on women in particular. And when you see that, it's usually time to do something better or different that suits you. And so what does that mean? Well, it might mean that you reconfigure the way that you engage in life. It might mean that you actually have to do a deep dive and a skill upgrade, which allows you to deeply be connected to your husband and your children, even in the modern day life, because not all of us have a way of escaping the level of pressure that's required of us. Some of us have to just move with it. But the space that we need is the most important thing. And so here's what you're going to do. You're going to watch the masterclass. You're going to find yourself some space. You're going to start with 20 minutes a day, and you're going to build up to an hour a day. And it's going to feel almost impossible to start with, but it's going to be the exact right thing. You're going to find a hobby that brings you pleasure and you can zone out in. It might be crocheting. It might be tapestry. I don't know what it is. I don't mind what it is, but I want you to introduce a hobby. I want you to introduce some space, some making something just for fun. It doesn't have to be beautiful. You don't have to share that on Instagram. You just have to give yourself space to be. And in that knowing that you get that space, you're going to see the impact of running on low energy for so long. And that's when we're going to need to do some work. because you can't leave it the way that it's been, and you can't leave the damage that's been done because you have had the load that you've had. And so that's where I come in. So you can book that masterclass in, you can click the link and watch it. And you can also book a call with me and my team, and we'll get you really clear on how do we grow you into someone that gets this space and also gets to repair and rebuild the marriage and probably your parenting as well, because we tend to be at our worst under pressure with the people we love the most, our kids and our husband. And so let's clean that up. Let's get you some space. Let's get you this sense of belonging to something bigger than you. Let's get you feeling nourished, like your gas tank is not, 1/4 of the way full. Instead, it's 3/4 of the way full. Think about how different life would be if you felt like your gas tank was right at the top. Think about the energy you would show up with from that different fuel that sits behind you rather than at the quarter or below, which is where most women run from. These are the things that make the biggest difference. It might sound small, but I tell you what, when you are able to have energy to show up in your life, everything starts to shift and change. But you've got to have the energy to start with. All of the skills, all of the masterclasses in the world don't even hit the sides if you don't have the energy to do something with them. And so you're going to watch the masterclass, you're going to book a call, you're going to find some time, 20 minutes a day, you're going to build up to an hour a day, you're going to do something that is just for you. Frivolous, you might think it is. Yeah, maybe. But isn't frivolous the exact thing that we need to feel like we're important? Spending time on whatever brings us pleasure. Okay, my loves, it was so nice being here with you tonight. I'll see you all very soon. You're all the best. Chuck out the rest. I'll talk to you later. Bye, darlings. Thank you for tuning into today's show. If you're feeling fired up and you're ready to grow and you want to know more about how to do that, here is what I want you to do now. I want you to watch my marriage masterclass. This masterclass will show you how my clients have turned their struggling marriages into thriving marriages, even without their husband's buy-in. How my clients have gone from cycles of poor communication, disconnect and loneliness to being teammates and soulmates with their husbands again, even after they've already tried everything. And the proven system my clients use to start transforming their marriages in minutes, not years, because life is too precious to waste one more minute in an unhappy and unfulfilling marriage. So if this is what you're looking for, I want you to click the link below